everybody.
From beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah,
It's Thank God I'm Atheist.
the podcast.
I'm Frank.
And sitting in for Dan, I'm Doug.
And coming up today, it's that special time of the year again. The Mormons
Feel it in the air.
the Mormons gather in mass downtown Salt Lake City. And we're going to be talking kind of a little preview and some recollections of general conferences past and whatnot. So, yeah. Where do we want to get started? Do you have a story?
Well, speaking of general conference, I do have a kind of an update on a story you guys have been following, and it's about the Mormon practice of making very young children tell their sexual picadillos to old men in a room with no one else there.
Right.
As you guys have discussed, the Mormon Church has been under fire lately for, I think in the context of the Me Too movement, among many other things. The practice of having to go once a year, is it once a year or twice a year?
I think it's like once a year.
Once a year, and sit with your bishop, who is always a man.
Right.
And kind of inventory your crimes and sexual indiscretions and impure thoughts. And you must do this from the time you start out around 8 years old, because it's post-baptism, because all your sins are washed away when you get baptized.
Right.
And then from the rest of your life, you go in and spend an hour a year telling your bishop all of the terrible things you've done over the course of the year, which nowadays would take more than an hour, but...
well, I mean, is that... I guess I never saw it that way as a kid. It was
really?
I get to meet with the bishop, right? And it never seemed creepy. I remember one bishop asking me if what was the phrase he used? Self-abuse.
Yes, exactly.
And I was just like, what is that?
Did he show you?
No, gross.
No, but you and I possess a certain anatomical feature that makes it seem a lot less creepy when we're meeting with a man to talk about man stuff. Mm-hmm. If you're a young woman, particularly if you're a young woman, and particularly if you are becoming sexually active, once a year you have to sit in a room alone with a man and describe in excruciating detail what you've done.
Right.
And, I think there's unfortunately, no man alive that would be able, that without training, that could sit in a room with a young woman describing sexual activity without, having some complications there.
Yeah.
And so this has really come into focus with this recording of this woman. I don't know if you guys talked about this or heard about this. Yeah. And did you listen to it?
No.
Oh, God.
Is it gross?
It's really rough. It's long. But she under the guise of being a reporter, gets her ex-mission president from many, many years ago to confess his sexual crimes against her.
Right.
And he does.
Yeah.
And that recording has brought all of this into sharp focus. So the Mormon Church, in a very, very rare departure from practice, has bent its practices to public outcry.
Right.
And is updating their policies on how they go about the bishop's interview.
Right.
And just today, as we're sitting here, there is a crowd gathering in downtown Salt Lake to take a petition to the church, kind of trying to get them to change this policy. Now, the church's change in policy doesn't really solve the problem, because their solution to having to sit alone with an old man and describe your sexual year is now, the solution is we'll have another adult sit in the room. So I don't know did you ever confess some of your things to the bishop?
No, I waited until my mission president. Nothing. Well, because also my dad was my bishop when I was like 13.
Oh no!
On right,
that's dreadful.
And 14 maybe. And so there was that, and there was just this, the amount of shame and everything that had been piled up on me. I felt, and in my head, the whole thought process was, there's no way that I could ever actually admit to any of this. It's so awful.
So stigmatized.
Right.
And then we're talking about masturbation, I assume.
Yeah,
or
that's it.
Thereabouts.
And some gay thoughts.
Right.
And actually some very gay thoughts.
I confessed masturbating when I was like 14 to the bishop. And the only thing that could have made that more terrible and horrible was having another guy sit in the room. I mean, what good would that have done me?
Right.
And
or your parent.
Oh, my, exactly. And that's part of the policy is you can have your parent sit in the room.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what to say. So that's the church's change in policy, is to allow for, not mandate, but allow for another person to be in the room. and it has to be at the request of the person who is being interviewed. So just put yourself in the position of, a 14-year-old girl who, got a little hot and heavy with her boyfriend, and you have to go into the bishop, but you've got this option of inviting another old man to come and watch you confess.
Could this young woman have her Sunday school teacher or somebody come?
I don't know.
A female.
It can be a female.
It can be a female.
It can be a female, which is a huge, step forward for the Mormon Church. But it doesn't solve the problem. I mean, the problem is making children confess to untrained people under the guise of having committed terrible sin and offended God. Right. There's really no way to make that not damaging, I don't think.
No, yeah.
The petition that's being taken to the church today by this group called Protect the Children actually is just, it's asking for the practice to be jettisoned entirely. Say, is no longer,
Take those questions out.
Take those questions out.
And the concern of the bishop about the sexual activities of kids. I mean, the issue here for the church, though, is they just lost a lot of control if they do that.
I think so.
I think they lose the next generation.
I think
because without their control and with their little fingers up in your brain,
I knew where you were going with that.
The people are going to leave.
I agree.
In much larger numbers than they already are.
I agree.
And they already have a problem with a purge happening in the church.
And the controls that were put in through the bishop's interview are not, they're recent, I guess. A lot of it comes from, what's his name? The one who just passed. The really
Thomas S. Monson.
Packer.
Oh, Packer.
Packer was instrumental in a lot of getting.
Packer's dead.
Packer's dead. You didn't hear the church bells ringing?
How did I miss that?
Didn't you see the sunrise was a little more beautiful that day? Yeah, without diverging, Boyd K. Packer was one of the ones who was instrumental because I don't know if you remember, the questions weren't just have you masturbated. It was how often have you masturbated?
Wow.
When did you and so for women confessing, the questions are always, okay, tell me about what sexual positions you got yourself into. Was there penetration? Was there, over the clothes, under the clothes?
These questions weren't in the handbook,
were
they? No.
Yes. And so...
How is it that I somehow got away with one bishop when I was 12 years old asking me if I self-abuse? And then when I said, what is that? He's like, well...
let's move on.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but maybe your bishops weren't attracted to you.
God. Well, sure, I'm fine. Good.
So
good to know.
No offense by that.
What a relief, actually.
The policy has changed at a certain degree, which in and of itself is kind of monumental.
Yeah.
But it is not doing nothing to the underlying problem, if not making it worse.
Well, and the way that the church works and the mentality of church members is even just asking for this accommodation, even though the church has said it's okay.
Yeah.
What you're really saying is, I don't trust you, Bishop.
Right.
I need somebody else. And so you're not going to do it.
Unless I wouldn't. And again, I don't want someone else having to watch me confess to this stuff.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right.
And let alone a parent or, who do you invite in if you're a 14-year-old? What adult do you feel comfortable with your sexuality with?
The young women's instructor who you trusted closely and that already knows what you did.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's who people will take in.
Let's hope so.
I want my confidant in the ward to come along with me as support.
Let's hope so.
But I don't know that that's the way that these kids will think.
I don't want to put myself back in that time and place, but I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have had the wherewithal.
Ugh.
So,
all right.
So updated.
All right. Well, where to go from there? Actually, I want to skip over to a coroner in the UK, right?
A Sex Pistols song, coroner in the UK.
Sounds likely. Her name is Mary Hassel, and she's the senior coroner for Inner North London, which I guess is an area that has a large, how would you say, Jewish and Muslim minority populations. Right? There's a lot of Muslim and Jewish communities in that part of London. and she has decided that she is going to operate her whole little coroner operation thing in a first-come, first-served basis, which is not how it's worked in the past or in other jurisdictions in the UK.
Oh,
because what these other jurisdictions are doing is they're giving a religious accommodation to Jewish and Muslim families to get their dead buried as quickly as possible.
Right.
Because I guess there's some religious need or belief about being buried fast.
Right.
Don't sit around for days on end.
Like us Christians.
Yeah, I know.
Just get to me when you get to me.
Former Christians. And this is causing quite a stir. The religious groups the barrister who's representing the Adith Yisrael Burial Society told the court, because this has been taken to court, that his case was not that religious groups must come first, but that religious beliefs must be conscientiously taken into account.
Okay.
Which sounds like that's semantics, really. He says, if the coroner's office knows that the family has a genuine religious need to hold the funeral of their loved one either later that day or the next day, this religious need cannot lawfully be excluded from the defendant's consideration. Yeah. And so she says, hey, listen, like, we're flexible, right? If we're able to fit you in, whatever, but like otherwise it is first come, first served. It's
a booming business. People are dying to get in.
No, yeah. But no, this is an operation of the state.
Sure.
We do not take these sort of religious needs, we don't place them at the forefront. Right. We'll do what we can, but if we can't, we're not going to.
Right. Which seems
totally fucking reasonable in a secular society.
So, I mean, what if I have a religious belief that I need to get treated at the emergency room very quickly, or that I need to get my coffee before
everyone else? Yeah.
Right.
I know you get to jump the queue.
I want to be in that religion.
We'll start it.
Exactly.
All you have to do is sign up.
And that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
We sue everybody in every coffee shop that doesn't give me my coffee quickly. And
me first.
Exactly.
It's,
me firstism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the center of your own universe. Everyone's your own God.
This thing's writing itself.
Yeah. You're your own God. I believe in me.
I'm gonna trademark the name.
Save myself.
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. I am the center of my own universe.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's called millennialism. Oh. Just kidding.
No, they're going to save us from ourselves.
That's true.
So let's not pick on millennials.
My opinions
of
millennials has changed dramatically in the past several weeks. So I apologize to those. Don't hack me.
We're sorry, our soon to be overlords.
That's right. Don't stalk me on MySpace. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So the company I work with is doing a fundraiser for the IRC, which is the International Rescue Committee. They're a really great group, and they've come into a lot of prominence lately because of the travel ban that went into effect and out of effect, and now is kind of bouncing around last year. And they're a pretty phenomenal group, and there's I'll just kind of walk you through what they do, but I also kind of want to talk about what it is like to be a refugee, the process you have to go through to get to this country, and in many cases what you're fleeing, which is almost certainly religiously motivated, whether it's politically engendered, but it's certainly religiously motivated. So whether it's the Rohingya in Myanmar right now that are fleeing militant Buddhism, or the Syrians in Syria fleeing, various sects of militant Islam, there's always religion baked into that cake somewhere. And I just wanted to kind of highlight what it is this organization does, the population it services, because it's pretty remarkable. So the IRC, it was actually founded by Albert Einstein.
What?
Yeah.
No way.
It's true, among others. But he came to this country in the 30s as a well-educated, refugee of means, and found it pretty hard to get by, to find a house, to find, resources to find a community.
Right.
And he thought, well, my God, what must it be like for those that are coming behind me that don't have means? So he was one of those who's founded this group. And right now they're active in over 40 countries. It was started in 1933. And basically the organization helps relocate refugees from, war-torn countries, the shithole countries.
Right.
And it's right now it's primarily Congo and Somalia and Syria, Sudan, a lot of countries that are experiencing extreme, name it, famines, wars, religious strife.
Right.
And basically, if you want to get out of your country, and mostly what will happen to you if you're a refugee, and a refugee, just to make the distinction from an immigrant, a refugee is forced out of their country.
Right.
An immigrant chooses to leave. And you're forced out for your political beliefs, religious beliefs, racial, gender, whatever it might be.
Climate.
But you're pushed out. And there are, something in the vicinity of 60 million refugees in the world right now. The High Council for the UN that actually designates you a refugee or not has designated about 22 million people as refugees. And mostly what happens to you, you're pushed out of your country and you will end up in a refugee camp in a neighboring country. And refugee camps are not nice places to live. No. And you will spend, on average, 16 years in a refugee camp if you're a refugee.
Oh my!
And
on average.
So some people will live their entire lives, and these are the famous ones in the West Bank and in Eritrea has a particularly large one that's taking Somali and Sudanese refugees, and it's a several million people large city. So most of these 60 million, 22 designated, live in refugee camps. So if you are so lucky to be able to actually apply for refugee status in the United States or another country that will take you, a European country, England, France, Germany, whatever.
Right.
It is an exhaustive and terrible process. So if you get accepted into the process for getting out of your country, it will take you on average 3 years. And if you're coming to the United States, first you have to be designated a refugee by the UN High Council on Refugees, which is that you have to, they have to determine, all right, you were forced out of your country by a legitimate enough reason to be classified a refugee. Then, if you want to come to the United States, you have to go through a process where you are interviewed and background checked by the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Defense Department, the State Department, the intelligence community, and finally Health and Human Services. You're given physicals, your history's checked into. And if you're a refugee coming into the United States, you are the most vetted person to enter this country by far.
Right.
And it's an incredibly vulnerable population. Under 50% of refugees are under 18, and 70% are women. And they're very young, they're very vulnerable. They picked up and left everything to flee their countries for various reasons. And they are, when Trump talks about the travel ban, this is who he's talking about. So when they shut that down last year, and I'll try and get through this without tearing up, there were people who had, waited their 15 or 16 years in refugee camps, gotten into the process, gotten to the point where they were accepted, and sold everything, given away, their homes were reallocated in the refugee camps, and Trump turned off the spigot. And these are people who are in such desperate straits, and now they have no recourse. There's nowhere to go. So apparently the most vulnerable population in the world right now is Syria, and we have so far in 2018. It's only been a few months, but the United States of America has relocated exactly 0 refugees from Syria because of the travel ban, because it's wending its way to the courts. And so, I think in the context of this podcast, just to talk about people, we've talked often about how, militant Islam, militant Christianity, no one suffers more than that than Muslims, Christians, and, these people fleeing this kind of terrible religious fervor, and then to somehow get stuck on the other side, motivated by some kind of, hyper-nationalism. It's just tragic. So I'll just say the IRC, what it's doing now since it's got no refugees coming in, is focusing on the refugees they've got, trying to further improve their lives.
Right.
If you're a refugee and you get through this process, when you get here, the IRC gets you to a place, they get you into a house with food, they help you find the job, they help you get job training and language training, They'll even cook you your first meal, and they cook you something that's something you recognize. So you're not getting, coming from Sudan and having to eat pizza or a cheeseburger for your first meal. I mean, it's truly remarkable work, and they're completely underfunded and under the gun right now, and in this political environment. It's a tragedy. It really is so. So there's that.
Well, right. Well, continuing with the on the theme of refugees, I'm going to go around the world to a different one, different story. This was I saw this on Vice actually, and it's a report about Muslims in Germany who are converting to Christianity, ostensibly as a way to gain asylum. And here's the tricky part, because they're coming from a refugee situation, right?
Sure.
The story focuses on this one guy who was born in Iran to a family from Afghanistan, but he was baptized Lutheran about a month ago, and what this does, and the reason that he's sort of in kind of a weird refugee limbo situation is he was in Sweden, I believe is where it said he was, and for whatever reason was denied permanent status in Sweden. And so he went to Germany because Germany has accepted so many refugees. And while he flat out, this is not his version of the story.
Sure.
If by converting to Christianity, he's placed himself he's basically amped up his risk as a refugee. He now faces religious problems back home. In Iran, he could be thrown into jail because he converted away from Islam.
Right.
And if somehow he got sent back to Afghanistan, they'd kill him.
Wow.
And so this story really looks into this situation, and in particular this one Lutheran minister, Gottfried Martens, who is, he says that of the 1,600 congregants that he's had since 2015 who were either Iranian or Afghani, a third of them have converted to Christianity.
Whoa.
They are his congregants currently because he houses them at his church.
Wow.
Out of just the long-standing tradition, police will not enter churches in Germany.
So these guys are holed up in his church.
They're holed up in his church, and about a third of them will end up actually going through the whole process. And he swears up and down that it's a sincere process, that they're not just converting to Christianity just to kind of try to create this little trick.
Right.
Because a lot of them are not receiving full asylum even after they do this. A lot of them are still getting sent home.
Wow.
But it does kind of work for some of them. But the German government's trying to really kind of just shut the whole thing down.
How would they do? Are they to shut down the conversion process?
No. They're trying to. Germany is not considering conversion once it's happened in Germany.
I see.
As a reason for asylum.
Right.
So he says, this is Martins, the state is a kind of secular version of the Holy Inquisition, because the state says we can look into the heart of those people and can say who is the true Christian and who is not. He says that the fact that the decisions are based on short interviews conducted by administrators who have no religious background, right, is particularly frustrating. I think a secular state is not able or not allowed to make such judgments about the faith of people. Which is an interesting...
He's got a point.
Interesting point. However, isn't that... I mean, a secular state needs to just disregard it, period.
Right.
And yet he would say it's something that should be considered.
Well, that's interesting.
Right? Don't you think?
That a secular state has to assume that when someone says they're religious, that's 100% correct.
Right.
And factor that into the...
But no, we can't.
Right. We can't.
also cannot trust that.
Right.
We have to like look into it and, because otherwise anyone can just play the system.
Yep.
Right.
And how do you, what's the criteria for determining if someone is truly Christian? Do they have to have like a working knowledge of the Bible? Because I know a lot of Christians who would not pass that particular threshold.
Well, I think it's the whole thing of like, if you're a convert, you have to know it inside and out.
Right.
Right. But if it's just given to you, no. It's like somebody who becomes a citizen of the U.S.
Right.
They end up knowing U.S. history way better than the rest of us.
Yeah, sure.
And they know more about our system than we do.
That's true.
And it's so... I remember I saw a film years and years and years ago about the American refugee system and asylum process that was looking into a lot of these same issues of like, how do we ascertain whether the person is earnest in their belief, or are they just playing the system?
See, and that's interesting because the Supreme Court of late has kind of injected that into our culture. The sincerely held religious belief clause. So the Hobby Lobby case was
right. So
how do you determine
what's sincere?
Yeah,
and what's a held belief?
Yeah, I just don't like gay people, or I sincerely believe that I can't bake a cake for this gay wedding. How does one determine that? Right? Because if I just don't like gay people, that's both. Not good enough.
It's both. You still go to that church,
exactly.
For that reason.
Exactly. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so it's tough, you want to help these people.
Yeah.
And you do. And I don't even know if it's almost like, why put them through that test?
Right.
Right? Like, isn't it just, can't we just acknowledge that going back to Iran is shitty?
Right.
Either way?
Right. And isn't part of what's motivating all of this that we're afraid of their native religion being brought into the... So shouldn't they be encouraged to...
Yeah. That was the situation in Germany. Like, apparently this was not really a big issue until recently. Like, Angela Merkel is a Christian Democrat, I think is her party. And she's the daughter of a Lutheran minister. And she was one of the most strident, accept everyone types in Germany. She was, let's take them all, basically. And, but the political landscape now in Germany isn't that.
No.
So she's actually now tempering her position on the refugee thing, and is like, we can't. We have to. It's in this article. She says, she faced significant backlash against her migrant-friendly policies in the months leading up to Germany's national elections last year. During that time, Germany processed more asylum applications than any other EU countries combined. But since then, she's had to form a government, and she's had to make compromises.
Right.
And she has pulled back.
Boy, this is kind of everything kind of dovetails in this vein because, I don't know what the stats are and what these refugees are doing to the country. If crime is increasing, or what homelessness, poverty, disease. I don't know those stats. I can make some assumptions, but I know for sure that influx of refugees is animating the right-wing movements in all of those European countries and ours.
I know.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's a cyclical process where the war-torn countries that are being torn apart by these religious strife are sending refugees into countries, and that's causing right-wing movements to get going. It's
a fucked up.
I've talked myself into a very dark place right now. Oh, that's crazy.
All right, what's your next one?
Okay,
what
so
you got?
I got Putin's Rasputin.
That's That's amazing. Is that the headline?
Actually, it's I was not the first person to think about it.
Okay,
In fact,
I'm like, that is particularly clever.
I should just claim it. In all the articles about this guy, this Alexander Dugin, we're going to talk about, 4 out of 5 call him Putin's Rasputin. And there's reasons. Russian politics are pretty crazy right now, and in the context of the Mueller investigation and Russian meddling in our country, it's particularly interesting. But Vladimir Putin's a particularly strange guy. Really, he is. And he's surrounded himself by all these oligarchs who are, when the Soviet Union fell, he carved up all of the industries in Russia and gave them to people. It didn't turn into a democratic free market system.
Right.
The oil, gas, telecommunications center were divvied out. And that's who these oligarchs are, just people beyond our understanding of wealth. And that's who runs Russia. And one of these guys is a guy named Alexander Dugin. And he's the guy often referred to as Putin's Rasputin or Putin's brain. And he has he's a very much like a Steve Bannon figure. Okay. So just kind of a very bizarre philosophy, very bizarre politics, doesn't quite fit into any of our classical pigeonholes. But he has an outsized power in Russia and is a huge Trump supporter, and is also a kind of confidant of Putin. So this guy, he's not a dummy. He speaks 10 languages.
Jesus.
He has this very strange political philosophy that kind of he has created. He has very deeply anti-scientific views. He's called for a ban on chemistry and physics.
What?
And he'd like to get rid of the internet. And he basically
who doesn't? Really?
Right. He basically sees the world as having gone through 3 giant political changes in the last little while. It was communism, fascism, communism, and liberalism. And liberalism would be capitalism.
Right. And
that both communism and fascism failed pretty spectacularly, and that liberalism is about to have a same kind of death. That liberalism, capitalism is about to go through the same thing that fascism and communism went through, a giant collapse. And he espouses a kind of this new philosophy that he calls Eurasianism. And it is kind of the rise of the landlocked empires.
Okay.
And he kind of sees the world as the whole of history as a battle against the traditional landlocked empires and the water-based, I know this is weird, empires. Right. So it's kind of maritime Atlantis versus traditional Eurasia.
Okay.
And that's how he sees the world. And he sees Russia, particularly right now, as kind of at its moment of ushering in the Eurasian era.
Wow.
And
so he is like excited about climate change and the rising of the oceans.
All of this fits into his philosophy.
Get rid of the coasts.
Yeah, right.
Get rid of them.
I get it. He's in a landlocked country, so you come up with a philosophy that makes sense for you. Not totally landlocked, but so he also has some very strange views about religion and homosexuality. He sees the LGBTQ movement as kind of the last phase of the liberal agenda, where we've freed people from institutions, we've freed people from religions, we being liberals in the West.
Yeah.
And our last step is to free people from the organs of their own body. And that's what the LGBTQ, that's a gay agenda.
Wow.
Is to separate us from our own gender identity. And so we're, but we're failing, like we're about to collapse. And I know this guy is all over the map. Okay, so yeah, he sees that the world is the Eurasian movement and union against Atlanticism. Continentalism is another word he gives it. So now all of this would be, whatever it would be. He's definitely a guy who is believed to have been involved in the meddling in the election. He's just and he's a huge Trump fan. He sees Trump as a disruption of America and a hastening of our collapse. So I don't kind of how fundamentalist Christians see Jews in Israel is I love you because you're going to help your own destruction.
Right.
And all of this would be fine and good, except for the fact that Putin, who was raised in the communist system and was an avowed atheist for most of his career, even up till somewhat recently, has taken a pretty deep dive into the Russian Orthodox Church.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And no one knows whether, speaking of sincerity, if it's a sincere move or if it's him deciding that this is a perfect tool for him to use. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I don't think it matters. Mm-hmm. But the Russian Orthodox Church is a particularly, stringent religious faith. And it is being espoused by Putin and by Dugin. And so they're kind of, the philosophy they talk about Russia's rise is an expressly ethnocentric, nationalist, religious movement. And they're borrowing a lot of ideas from, the kind of proto-Nazi movements in Germany that kind of, wrapped up nationalism, occultism, and religion. And there's a lot of that going on in Russia. And so that's, where we're at in this moment. This kind of to give sops to the religious right in Russia, Putin has been passing, as you guys have discussed on the show, the crazy anti-gay laws in Russia.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the worst places to be gay is in Russia right now. Mm-hmm. They've also passed laws that make domestic violence okay.
Yeah.
You can smack your wife around, and if you get caught, you pay a fine. Mm-hmm. 14,000 women died of domestic violence last year in Russia.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
They're passing laws to target other churches and faiths, so they're making it harder to be a religious group that's not Russian Orthodox in Russia.
Right.
Midnight raids, discrimination. It is a particularly scary and onerous mixing of religion and politics. Mm-hmm. And, that has never really gone well for anybody.
No.
And so,
especially the people who have to live in
exactly.
That horror.
And so, we're in the context of what they did to our election, it's all part of this agenda and pushing this Eurasianism. So,
well,
Putin's Rasputin, everybody.
Well, the transition from that, strangely, our minds were not that far apart. I found this article in the Washington Post that talks about why evangelicals aren't rejecting Trump. And I mean, I think it's we've danced around it on the show, right? And I think a lot of us kind of sort of, and we kind of get it. Well, he's getting them what they want, but what is it exactly that they want?
Right.
Because I think I would have said, well, he's going to finally, or at least try, to help them crush abortion,
right?
Once and for all, and looking at the specific issues, right? But this article takes the stance that it's actually a broader issue, and I like that because it starts to put it into terms that we can start to attack and we can start to be aware of in a more broad way, and that sense is Christian nationalism. So they looked at there was a poll that they analyzed in order to come to this conclusion that was taken right after the election. And they asked the questions that these folks were interested in were these ones. And the respondents were asked these questions. So do you agree or disagree with these statements? The federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. The federal government should advocate Christian values. The federal government should enforce strict separation of church and state. The federal government should allow the display of religious symbols in public spaces.
Boy, this is all the hot buttons, isn't it?
Yeah. The success of the United States is part of God's plan.
Oh, dear.
The federal government should allow prayer in public schools. So, turns out that someone who believed the United States should be, or either is or should be, a Christian nation is obviously more likely to vote for Trump.
Right.
So much so that you could look at a Democrat who responded positively to the idea of American religious nationalism, Christian nationalism. They were 3 times more likely than a standard Democrat to vote for Donald Trump. it's really kind of fucking crazy. Likewise, a Republican who scored low on the Christian nationalism scale was significantly less likely to vote for Trump. And so this actually makes me go, does this kind of explain Utah a little bit?
Yeah.
Because Mormons, by and large, I think they like to think of a day when Jesus is going to reign.
Right.
Right. And they certainly like to live in a state that's controlled by their religion.
Sure. And they do.
and they do. But they don't believe in like a massive religious takeover of the United States.
No, that's not a Mormon tenet.
No. And so you see in our election, or during the presidential election here in Utah, the rise of a third party candidate who took a big chunk. Wasn't it like 30%?
Yeah, it was. He did obviously better in Utah than anywhere because he was a Mormon.
Right.
But yeah, it was he took and for Utah to not go full Republican ticket
is bizarre.
Pretty crazy.
But and it kind of helps to explain the Mormon hesitation to support Trump.
Right.
By and large. Like your party loyalists were just like, yeah, okay, Trump, great.
Right.
But the rest of the folks were just like, but he's a horrible sicko who doesn't,
yeah,
who doesn't espouse our values.
His
right?
personal picadillos mattered more to Mormons.
Right.
Because and that makes sense because if you don't care about what he is as a person, you just consider him to be a vessel.
Right.
And you don't even want an agenda, you just want this country to be
right.
designated as a religious country. Then
right.
it doesn't matter how we get there.
Right.
And so I don't care if he's sleeping with prostitutes or whatever.
Right.
If he gets us that closer to that goal,
right.
then fine.
So it's okay because he's going to get us a Christian nation.
Right.
But he doesn't have to be a good Christian to do that.
Right.
Which is bizarre. Like, don't you want the person representing you to, like, really espouse your values?
You would
think. How delusional are you, that you think that this person who's greedy, self-interested, has never said a Christian thing in his life.
Right.
To
this day.
Yeah. Right.
I see a lot of pastors.
How is he going to bring about your thing?
Right. I think it's a disruption, right? It's just he's going to shake it up and he's going to allow more pious men, or he's going to appoint more pious men, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've seen pastors lately, especially in the wake of the Stormy Daniels nastiness, going on TV trying to justify, well, it was 12 years ago.
Right.
Right. He's a converted man. And all I can say is I don't see it.
Yeah.
I've seen people who found religion. They act a certain way. And you know what I mean? Like they sound a certain way.
Right.
And Trump is, he's doing terrible things today.
Right.
That normally Christians would find repulsive.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. But do you feel that Mormons have gotten used to him though? Do you feel like the support, because statistically his support has gone up in Utah?
Yeah.
Do you think they're
I think that, Utah is such a red state. The party loyalism, just the he's a Republican, and he got us this tax break, and he this and he that. Like, yeah, they might still find him distasteful, but he's not.
But he's who we got.
He's
kind of a thing.
So let's work with him or whatever. But they didn't want him.
No. No.
And so yeah, it's just kind of fascinating that this is the thing, and I like it being identified. And I knew that it was a concept. I knew that Christian nationalism, but that's what we need to be decrying now.
Right.
Right. Is no, you're a Christian nationalist.
Right.
Right. We don't want the Christian nation. This is a secular country where Jews, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and atheists can all live together.
Well, and it never was the country you're pretending it was. It was never that country that was expressly religious, expressly Christian.
Right. It's just you guys kind of got away with it in certain places.
In certain places. Below the Mason-Dixon line up until 1865, for example.
Well, and sadly, probably a little bit beyond that. The whole prayers in schools thing wasn't official until the 70s?
I remember praying. I led prayers in my high school.
You're kidding me.
No. I was on the swim team, and we would go pray before every meet.
What?
And when I was captain of the team, it was my job. I was captain of the swim team. Just a little humble brag there.
Wow.
Go Highland Rams. I would lead the prayer, and there were a couple of guys who were Jewish on the team, and we've had conversations since that they were like, that was fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was friends with them.
Wow.
It just didn't occur to me.
Right.
Because I had that privileged position that I think is what's motivating a lot of these people is, this is my country.
Well, yeah, I mean, prayer definitely continued in athletics.
Yeah, but assemblies and stuff, it was, yeah.
Like, you didn't have a prayer at the beginning of the school day, did you?
No.
Or anything like that?
That was gone by then.
Yeah.
I remember it being a hot button issue, though, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because it was taken away by that liberal Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting that it's not just that Donald Trump isn't as holy as you might expect.
Right.
It is that he is the antithesis of...
Yeah.
He is the least holy man I've ever encountered, I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You couldn't write him in fiction. No one would believe you. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you've got to give this guy a characteristic that's likable.
Redeemable.
Right.
Right.
Tony Soprano was a good family man.
Yeah. No, well, Donald loves his daughter.
He sure does. God.
And tolerates his son.
They've got good livers and organs that could be harvested one day.
That's what Eric's for.
He's just organ bank.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, if you guys have any ideas of what to do with Donald Trump's organs or otherwise, please...
Paperweight, doorstop.
Send us an email, podcast@thankgodimatheist.com, or you can leave us a voicemail message. The telephone number is 424-666-8442. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/TGIAtheist. And, there's also that lovely members-only lounge on Facebook, which is a great thing to join. The conversation there is civil, it's moderated, and you just have to request to join it. We'll let you in.
Boy, civil conversation is such a nice thing these days.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, yo. What's up, Frank?
Do you enjoy Jim Baker?
Do I enjoy Jim Baker?
That is his crazy wife, Lori. Well, they're both crazy. Crazy Jim Baker and crazy Lori. So here's a clip from the Jim Baker show where they are talking about, all of us God haters who are trying to get, religious symbols removed from public spaces. And they come up with a public space that apparently we're trying to get stuff removed from. So let's take a listen.
Don't touch God's anointed.
Never.
They're going to see some things happen. You're going to say, my God, why are people falling over dead?
That's right.
Because they've touched God's anointed.
It's true.
And even people who have blasphemed Billy Graham's memory.
Oh.
It's on the internet. You know that.
Oh, sick.
They're so sick in America that they don't respect anything.
Right.
They don't respect God.
No.
You know what they're talking about they're going to do now? They're going to remove all the crosses at the great cemetery in Washington.
Well, they can't do that. Are you kidding?
No,
How could
I'm
they
not.
remove
No,
all the crosses
I am not kidding.
at Arlington?
That's where all the soldiers, millions of them, are buried.
The white crosses are soldiers
Thousands and
who were
thousands.
Ricky's age, who died for this country.
They have no respect for those that have gone before.
There's nothing like going to Arlington
Even the
Cemetery
history
and
of
seeing
America is being desecrated.
My goodness.
There's nothing to respect anymore. So we are in the last days.
Jesus Christ.
They're such lunatics.
Where do they get this shit?
I have no clue. I have not heard about this effort to remove crosses.
I have not gotten that call to action.
I have no fucking clue. There's a picture that pops up when they're talking about it, right? Because this is from video, of course, that shows a very large cross,
all right,
kind of monumental cross that looks like it's like at an entrance to a cemetery.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's some movement to get that taken down because it's a public cemetery.
Right.
But
But
nobody's going to take the crosses off the headstones
No.
or like off of a little chapel that some Christian group might have built there. It's just not going to fucking happen.
As a devout atheist, if I saw somebody taking a cross off a grave, there'd be a fight.
Yeah.
Like, we would all rush in. Like, what?
Yeah.
But what's scary is, where do they get this? And, you know, my mother was one of those, well, she's still with us, who this kind of thing would enter her brain and live there. She would hear it from Jim Bakker, and that's just like, that's it. That's fact. Liberals are trying to take crosses out of cemeteries. I'm going to go to my grave believing that fact.
Right.
So, you know, where are they getting this shit?
I don't know. I do believe half of it they make up wholesale.
At least half.
The other half they probably get from Alex Jones.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you're probably right.
Like at this point, there's so many conspiracy theories constantly being spun and getting out there, getting real exposure,
and and by the time you try and debunk it, you're 10 past now.
And most of them are just laughably ridiculous, like Jews controlling the weather. You know,
wait, what are you saying?
So the Rothschilds can make money, you know, and like,
yeah, you're probably exactly right. There was like a big cross that was probably crumbling, and it was a danger, like a menace. And they're like, oh, we got to take this cross down, and oh my God, the liberals are taking crosses from Washington,
or Arlington in Washington.
My God,
yeah. But of course, you know, I mean, you mentioned your mom.
Yeah.
Right.
She's a listener.
To this show?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, my God. I was like, really?
I'm pretty sure she's not a listener to this show.
I would be mortified.
If the NRA sponsored
parents.
your show, my mom might listen.
Oh, God.
And that's a true statement.
No, but like, you know, Mormons don't do the whole cross thing.
No, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, my mom just the other day, they're obsessed right now with their deaths. It's so bizarre. My dad had cancer.
Sure.
He's had multiple cancers. And the last one was really scary, and how he got through it it's a miracle. Wow. He had stage 4 lung cancer.
No way.
And he was going down.
No way.
And they put him on some medication that should not technically have, like, he wasn't a genetic match for it or something.
Yeah.
But like 10% of the population responds positively to this drug, even though they don't have the marker. And the way my parents tell me, they don't necessarily know why that's the case, but they just decided, hey, the chemo's killing you.
Right.
So here you go. Boom. You're on this. And he's basically full.
Wow.
I mean,
well, that's great.
Then the PET scans and everything's gone. But anyway, so the last year they have been prepping for their deaths.
All right.
And so they have everything's paid for. They've got the whole plan.
That's prudent.
They've decided to be cremated. Like,
really?
Mormon parents have decided to be cremated, which is just so bizarre.
Interesting.
But the last 2 conversations I've had with my mom, the first one, she tells me that she wants their dog who just died, its ashes, to be added to theirs when they die, and be buried with them.
Sure, Mom.
Right? That's fucking weird. And then the other one was she sent me a text, a picture of their monument.
Oh,
it's done. It's
way.
on their plot, and because even though they're being cremated, they're still going to be buried.
Boy.
And it says Feldman across the top and has their names and their birth dates already on it. She says on the back of it, there's a space for all of our names if we want to be buried there too. I'm just like, no, that's okay, Mom.
Can I think about it?
That's fine. But there's the big Angel Moroni right on top of the damn thing.
Awesome.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's just so fucking weird.
That's so strange. I mean, it's very prudent of them.
Yeah.
But it's also pretty weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird for me, right?
Yeah.
Because they're in their 70s,
Sure.
mid-70s now, and so they're starting to really think about it. But my mom's mom is still alive.
Wow.
She's kicking it. Yeah. In Reno.
No, really?
Just doing fine.
Wow.
And I I mean, not she's in her 90s. She's not doing fine, but she's
doing better than me, probably.
Yeah, she's doing great.
Wow.
And so, like, I don't know. It's anyway. They faced death. They stared it down.
Yeah.
And now they're just like, okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just be ready.
They go about it. It sounds like they're going about it with the same kind of resolve as and peace as atheists. You know what I mean? Like, or you know, I mean, it's rare that people kind of live a life believing in judgment and heaven and hell. You know what I mean? And have that kind of sanguine attitude right at the end. It's very interesting. I'm not accusing your parents of being atheists. I would never do that. But you know what I mean? Like, that's a very peaceful way of thinking about it. A very like universally like, okay, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's prepare.
I know, that's crazy. Anyway, we do have some people to thank this week. People who are still with us
as of recording.
It was pretty amazing. We have 3 new patrons this week on Patreon.
Excellent.
We have Melody, who is a new faithful listener. Udo is a new beatified listener. And Santiago is a new pope.
What a great...
We don't get new popes very often.
Great.
So thank you so much, guys. It's such a help. You know, now all 3 of these folks have access to bonus content on our that's available through our Patreon page. You can get to Patreon by going to thankgodimatheist.com and clicking on our support tab. That'll take you right to our page. And all listeners get access to a commercial-free version of the show, which is awesome. And then starting at just the 2nd level, we have the Frank and Dan Diaries, which is just Dan and me rambling on about anything, and usually multiple things in some weird string of consciousness.
Some ayahuasca haze.
If you don't pin us down with some stories to talk about, we will literally jump topic to topic every 30 seconds. So, so thank you so much, guys. And of course, we always have to thank our top donor, our Lord and Savior, Angela herself. She continues to reign supreme, and thank you so much. And we bless you in the name of Angela.
Frank just did a little cross there with a little incantation.
We bless you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Doug.
Hey, Frank.
Conference is coming up.
Conference is upon us.
Tomorrow, and it starts.
Well, tonight, the young men's. Remember, the young men's thing would happen tonight.
There's a young men's thing.
Yeah, remember there was like a fireside the Friday night. I think they even do one for the women, for the lady folk now.
No.
Yeah.
I don't remember this.
They don't. Yeah, like you'd go to the steak center, and they would broadcast one of the Skeksis reading.
How do I not? We were so into all of this. How do I not remember this?
Yeah, remember it was like the thing you did, because what I need is more conference.
So they have figured out how to ruin your entire weekend.
Totally.
Because that's what I'm seeing.
Exactly.
They couldn't even leave Friday night alone.
And we go sit on those crappy folding chairs in the steak center auxiliary room. And
oh my God. I was already so bitter about the Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
We aren't thinking of the priesthood session, are you?
That's what I mean.
That's Saturday night.
That's Saturday night?
Yeah, they fit in 3 sessions three 2-hour sessions on Saturday.
Right.
And then 2 2-hour sessions on Sunday.
Oh my God. I think it might actually be the women's one they do on Friday nights now.
Is that what it is?
I think so.
Okay.
They threw a sop to the lady folk.
Okay.
And they get to go do it what the men folk do. But that way, there's always a parent home with the Rugrats.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No.
They consider it like that.
They got that worked out. Isn't that great? But yeah, General Conference. It's such a strange thing. Like growing up, I didn't grow up in Utah, so I didn't have the pleasure of it being broadcast on Channel 5. Right? Like we had to actually get up and get dressed for church and
oh my God,
go to the nearest church with a satellite dish, and not all of them had satellite.
Right.
So it was always kind of a thing, and you'd go and you'd sit in the chapel and be up on the big TV. In later years, when we lived in Oklahoma, it was just a little wheeled out TV.
Oh yeah,
because 5 people showed up.
I remember those.
And
from the AV room.
Yeah, but like here in Utah, it's on so you could just enjoy it from home.
And enjoy it. Enjoy. Yeah, it was piped right into your goddamn house. See, I looked at it as you couldn't get away from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, my parents used to make us watch it. We had to put our Sunday best on and watch the TV.
See, I've never heard that one before. Like most people, like at least enjoyed the fact that they
didn't have to get dressed up.
Could watch it in their pajamas.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, what's I hope my mom's not listening. She would wear her pajamas. We had to get dressed up.
No.
Yeah, we had to put our Sunday best on, but she didn't bother. And you know, it's Sunday best for a Mormon woman in the 80s was just a dress, like not like an evening gown, like a like a muumuu.
But so
type.
she didn't lead by example.
No, in fact, if I write a book about my mom, that's going to be the title of it. She didn't lead by example. Love you, Mom.
That's amazing. But yeah, so it's this semi-annual event, and this one is kind of an important one.
Yeah, there's a lot happening.
Because as listeners of the show know, Thomas S. Monson, the previous president of the church, passed away a few months ago.
Yep.
And since then, there's been a new prophet. It happens immediately. But this is going to be his first general conference.
Yep.
Elder Nelson? I think so. The names are getting harder and harder.
I know.
And I love that they're getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's Elder Nelson, or President Nelson.
President Nelson.
now.
President Nelson to you.
Yeah. And so it would be his first. But there was also another passing since the last general conference. I think wasn't it David B. Haight?
Yeah,
passed away.
That's correct.
So there's actually 2 openings in the quorum of the 12 at this moment.
And it wasn't the last conference, but it was the one before that, or maybe the one before that, where there were 3 that had passed. That's when Packer died, and a couple others.
Really?
So there's been some tremendous turnover in the quorum.
I didn't realize that many had passed.
Yeah, it's a new day.
So
some young blood.
So what? Yeah,
so to speak.
So young. It's always nice to have septuagenarians referred to as young. But yeah, so, and it's obviously an organization that needs to go through some change. Yeah. You know, they're having some problems with some of the issues that we talked about already on the show. But just some real, also just ongoing growing pains in a modern, and in an information age.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I don't know how they manage it. I'm curious.
They need to get they need 2 millennials called to the Quorum of the 12. Everybody's asked, or, you know, like, there was this special section in the Salt Lake Tribune this week, which I've never seen them do before. It's kind of like leading up to General Conference.
I've never heard of that.
And it was really, really, really quite strange. But one of the things that they had was kind of they sort of did a casual poll where they asked some readers what they were hoping for in the upcoming general conference.
All right.
And one of the themes was that people want there to be more diversity at the higher levels of the church.
Right.
They'd like to see somebody from maybe South America,
right,
or somebody who has a different skin complexion than the rest of them. And I think that's kind of fascinating. But I don't know that they're in tune with that.
Well, the problem is that, you know, it has been brought up many times, the church is verging on being a majority-minority church. Like, the only place it's actually growing well is in South America and Africa.
Yeah.
And it's getting some traction in Eastern Europe and Asia.
Wow.
But you know, it's booming in South America and it's booming in Africa. And in 10 or 15 years, it will tip that point, and it'll be majority non-white.
Right.
But if you look at the 12 apostles, the first presidency, and the quorum of the 70s, which is the next echelon of leadership,
right,
it's hundreds of white dudes.
Yeah.
And like a couple not white guys.
Right.
Like, so it's a very unrepresentative leadership structure.
Yeah.
But it's also, I don't know how they inject race into that. Ethnicity into that. I just don't see it.
Right.
Because they would have to pluck someone from like a bishopric.
Right.
And make them an apostle.
Right.
Because there's no like farm team of non-whites
right.
in this church.
I know.
So
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and the only real taste of diversity that they have at the top is Uchtdorf.
Uchtdorf.
And he's German.
And that's not a made-up name. Yeah, he's beloved.
Beloved. Yeah. They love that man.
Yeah, they do.
And Nelson demoted him,
which
I think is bizarro.
Yeah. Apparently, there's quite a bit of palace intrigue in that. They're all vying for power.
Really?
Yeah, because and it's a lifetime appointment.
Right.
So you get brought up when you're like 50 into the quorum, and you live till you're 90. So for 40 years, you're vying for power and authority, and I can't imagine that. These people stay friendly this entire time. But who knows?
Yeah,
who knows? But I don't see how they can. I don't know. The church absolutely needs to diversify its leadership.
Yeah.
But it's such a hierarchical faith, and those echelons that would be the people who would be brought up into the 12 are still all white.
Well, and I think that they are terrified of the prospect of the church changing.
Yes.
And because they need it to stay exactly the same. That's their power.
But at what point, if you're Latino or African, at what point do you why would I join this religion?
Well, it did take until the 1980s for the Catholics to pick their first non-Italian pope in hundreds of years.
Yep.
And then before that, there were like 2 French guys, and then it's a string of Italians all the way back to Constantine.
That's a fair point. That maybe it's you join the religion because of the doctrine, not necessarily the leadership.
Yeah,
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, and I guess it's happening now. So why not believe it will continue to happen?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
So,
but it bears repeating that the guys who are in the 12 apostles, minus a couple. And certainly the first presidency. These guys were bishops, stake presidents, mission presidents, when the church would not allow black people. Oh. These people cut their teeth in the faith, became faithful, and began their journey upward in a religion that was avowedly racist.
Right.
So who's to say that many of those people don't retain that programming to some degree or another?
Well, yeah, and then how do they... I guess getting good on the gay issue would just be a step too far for them.
I think so.
Because they've already had to make a huge step in their life.
I don't think they would. Yeah.
I mean, that's actually a really good point. They remember a very different church.
Yep.
From a very different time.
And it didn't change because of, popular demand. It changed because, for polygamy, they needed statehood. And for the black issue in the church, it was the civil rights pressure they could no longer push against. You know what I mean? And so there were reasons they made these changes that were not necessarily altruistic.
Right.
So I don't think the pressure's there on the gay thing. Maybe it will come to bear. Maybe BYU won't be able to play other schools in sports or something like that.
That's about the only thing that will get their attention.
Yeah.
Is BYU sports.
Yes. Second only to God in the minds of most Mormons.
Oh my goodness! Well, we do need to wrap it up. I have lunch plans.
Oh,
and so I'm kind of watching.
Oh no,
the clock.
I don't. I'm fine, thank you. Just tell me where a deli is nearby, and I'll...
Yeah, and if you have anything that you'd like to add to this conversation, any recollections of conferences past, please do give us a call. 424-666-8442 is the telephone number, or you could email us. The email address is podcast@thankgodimatheist.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/TGIAtheist. There's also the Members Only Lounge, which is a really nice place to spend some time That's on Facebook. Just go on Facebook and search for it. Request to join, and we'll let you in. You can watch us most weeks on YouTube, youtube.com/TGIAtheist. And, of course, you can also support the show on Patreon by going to thankgodimatheist.com and clicking on the support tab. All right, guys. Well, we need to thank Doug for sitting in this week. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I think this is my third.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's one with Dan,
two
with me.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's always great. So
back at you.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for continuing to listen. And have a good week.
Bye now.
Bye.